Alright, so we just finished talking about demand. Now we're going to talk about the other side of the market, the supply curve. And so the example we've kind of been working with is with demand for purses. We had Kay and Laura's demand for purses. Now we're going to take a look at the supplier side, and suppose we have a supplier. So, but first let's define what supply is. Just like demand, there's two different ways to think about it. But one way to think about it is the minimum willingness to accept for each quantity produced. So we think about it, what the supply curve is going to tell us is the price that a seller is going to ask us for in order to get them to produce a given level of goods. So that's what this function is here. P equals 3 plus 3 over 2Q. This function is saying, hey, if I want the supplier to produce a given quantity of goods, this is the price I'm going to have to be willing to pay them. So that's going to be the minimum they're going to be willing to accept to get them to produce that good. The other way to think about it is that this is going to be the quantity the producer is willing to produce for each price. Right? So this is what would happen if we rearranged our function to Q equals a function of P. Now we're saying if I show the producer a price, that's how much they're willing to produce. Again, they're equivalent definitions. To get an idea of what the supply curve looks like, let's plug in some of the prices that we looked at for purses with Kay and Laura. At $18, how many units is this supplier willing to supply? Well, we just plug in for price. 18 divided by 3 is 6. 6 times 2 is 12. 12 minus 2 is 10. So at a price level of $18, this supplier can produce 10 purses. If the price goes down, what do you think? Are suppliers going to be willing to supply more or less when prices go down? They're going to be willing to supply less, right? Lower prices, they have costs to cover. They're not going to be willing to produce as many goods. So we can plug in again. $15 in for P. 15 divided by 3 is 5, times 2 is 10. 10 plus 2 is 8. Go ahead and finish the rest of the table and pause the video. Okay, if you've done this correctly, 6, 4, 2, and 0. Right? 3 divided by 3 is 1. 2 minus 2 is 0. So $3, they're not going to be willing to supply any. So at any price below there, they're still not going to be able to supply any purses. So that's what a supply curve looks like. So if we were to pen down the law of demand, or law of supply, what would you write? If you were to come up with the definition of the law of supply, what would you write? Law of supply. Price and quantity are blank related. Ceteris paribus. So what have you got? Positively or negatively related? The answer is positively. Okay? As price goes up, quantity supplied goes up. Suppliers are willing to supply more quantity as we increase the price. Prices go down, they're going to be willing to supply less. So quantity goes down as price goes down. Law of supply is opposite the law of demand. Sellers like high prices. Buyers do not. So, what we want to get used to in this class is plotting curves, because the models that we're going to use are often graphical models. So we can come over here and put quantity on the horizontal and price. And this time we want to plot the supply curve. Well, this function is what puts the horizontal axis on the as like the dependent variable. We got it in slope-intercept form. If this firm is producing 0 quantity, what's the price? Must be 3. We can see that here, 0, 3. It has a positive slope of 3/2. So what I often like to do when I'm plotting curves is go with the maximum data point that I have. So let's go all the way up 6, 9, 12, 15, 18. And I draw a nice box over. I know the most I can have is 10 units of quantity come down. And I know that at $18, this supplier is going to supply 10, and I can draw a nice line. This is our supply curve. Positive relationship between P and Q shows the line sloping upward, and that's your supply curve. And so if you wanted to plot more of the points, we could at a price of 6. Let's cut that in half. 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. At a price of 6, they're going to supply 2. At a price of 9, they're willing to supply 4. And so on. Right? That supply curve models the relationship between P and Q for this supplier. The question is why? Right? Supply curve slopes upward. Why is it the case that suppliers require a higher price for every quantity they produce? Why not the same price for every quantity they produce? What I'd like for you to do is pause the video now and then go into your slide deck and find the go into the slide deck that I provided for you, and I've put a slide in there that says, why do supply curves slope upward with a question mark? It's underlined in a clickable link. Click it and watch that video. I'm going to have a quiz question about that video to think about why supply curve slopes upward.